been an interesting run of events since June 27th of last year. Part of the reality of what that fire kind of brought about, and I know you've heard bits and pieces of it throughout these subsequent months, but that it really drew our minds and our hearts to the reality of some other things going on in this church that to some degree have been neglected or to some degree have been bandaged over the decades. And it's something that I particularly was drawn to. I don't know if some of you have maybe heard the story of this board. I don't usually use props in my homilies. But this board is one of the stairs from that southeast tower that went up to the library. And so the fire starting up in the library came down the stairs and burned a number of the stairs. And this was one of the stairs that was burned, the top board of the stairs. And late in July and August, these things were torn out and thrown to a big dumpster that were out in front of the church, seemingly to be just charred wood. On the back of this piece of wood, which is the underside of the stair, is a signature. And it underneath the signature says Beloit, Kansas. And the signature is Reverend Monsignor Heights. And if you don't know the story, as I've told the story, Monsignor Heights was the one who moved here before the turn of the century and was the one who had the ideas about this church that would be built. And he was the one who had these ideas that it wouldn't just be a normal church, but that it would be a church that rivaled the churches that he had witnessed in Europe. The largest church west of the Mississippi River, the first church in the United States to have the unique flying buttresses above the columns. And it could have been looked at as craziness. And it could have been looked at as this man wanting to, in his pride, put up a church like that. And I think this, to me, tells you the elements of pride that were in the project. His signature on the project was in the southeast tower on the bottom side of a step. This would never have been found had it not been for the fire. And I think that to me says God's plan. That to me says that's not just a Monsignor's plan, that he was with being placed upon his heart, the building of this church that we have taken advantage of for 120 years, been blessed by for 120 years, the work that went into this church of your ancestors in this parish community. I know I've spoken of it before, but the 5,400 loads of limestone attributed to every parish family at that time. Craziness. But they did it, and we've been blessed by it. And I think similarly to that time in history, God is inviting us to take seriously our responsibility to take care of what has been given to us. The bishop is excited. He's seen the plan that we're handing out to you today, and he's excited. Part of the discussion of that plan, and I know it's been part of the discussion, is it's first addressing the things that are immediately a problem, which is the fact that water is flowing into our church every time it rains. And so the roof, which is a $750,000 minimum job. The windows, which every time there is a wind blowing, some of the windows are swaying back and forth a couple of inches. And so those need to be restored and shored up. That's up to $400,000 to do those. Already with those two projects at $1.2 million, and you could be like, well, if that's a big price tag, Father, let's just stop there. But I think God is inviting us to something bigger. I think God is inviting us to restore the beauty of this church as it was first decorated, as it was first handed off to the St. John the Baptist community. I know one of the questions that's come up with that restoration is the conversation of a communion rail. I know I made reference to it once. Some of you who have seen the image that we first had together, the rendering, it's been a conversation that we had with the art and architecture for the diocese. It's been something that I've spoken to the bishop about probably 4 different times, one-on-one in the phone. And it's been decided through prayer and through discernment that at this time that's not going to be part of this project. And at this time I'm trusting in the providence of God and that. I'm also excited that as part of this we'll be taking care of some of the other elements of the church that are falling apart. I got a text message yesterday. Somebody said, "Father, the third pew on the right side is kind of collapsed." And so we just took it apart and left it laying there. I was like, well, that's not going to be a forced prop in my homily. Yeah, it's right over here. It's not the only pew that is showing the signs of age and wear and tear, as well as the floor damaged from moisture, damaged from use over the years. All of these things and the details of all of those things will be in here in greater detail. Through much conversation with the Finance Council, we talked about the options of fundraising, what we're planning on doing. We talked about hiring somebody. We talked about hiring a fundraising firm. And after much deliberation, we have asked Cornerstone, the Cornerstone Foundation, to be the fundraising firm of this project, which means their compensation will come by means of their work through the parish, so that every cent that goes to this project, that is donated to this project, will go to the parish directly. And after meeting with only 5 families at this point, we are not starting at 0. We're starting with a 2-year pledge from those 5 families with $850,000. Some of the generous donations that have come in the last year that we have on hand is between $250,000 to $300,000. So we're starting at 1.1, both including on hand and pledged monies. But the reality of this project is that we're asking for a price tag of $3 million to complete it all. But I think it's something that is extremely accessible, and it's something that is not something that's going to be handed off to just big donors, but that every single one of us have to seriously pray and consider, what is it that God is inviting me to do, to be as part of this restoration. Again, we've benefited from this church for 120 years. And I think it's our time. The time is now to restore what has been handed on to us for the next 100 years. Not everybody is expected to give the same, but everybody is expected to the same level of sacrifice in giving. And so what is God inviting you to do, to consider in this project? The last thing is kind of a question of beauty. I know sometimes one of the contentions, and it's out there in our culture, and I know it's even in this town, is this can be seen as spending millions of dollars for a material thing. Spending millions of dollars for a church. Why do Catholics still feel the call to do that when there's so many other needs, so many other concerns? And the reality is, our call is definitely to be responsible for those other concerns. That's been part of the mission of the Catholic Church from its foundation. But the bottom line is the reality that has existed as well since churches began to be built, is that there is a real connection between our human need in being in a body and being sacramental in our bodies with 5 senses that as part of our faith, it's not just a spiritual worship. This is perhaps one of the most foundational principles of our Catholic faith. We are spirits, but yes, we also are senses, our bodies are corporal. And in that, story after story after story in today's world, in today's church, young people, middle-aged people, old people, feeling disconnected from faith, feeling disconnected from church, stories of young men giving their lives to Christ in seminary, going to priesthood. All of these stories, one common denominator is that they were drawn into the physical beauty of a church as part of their story. That there is something innately connected for us in our worship to beauty. And that's a significant part of where I think God is inviting us. And so my encouragement, my challenge, my feel as your shepherd, this isn't my project as much as this church wasn't Monsignor Heights' project. I feel like again and again and again, God is inviting me, God is nudging me as shepherd to lead in this, and to challenge and encourage all of you that we might participate together as we prepare the way, honor, restore, believe, honoring what we've been given and those who placed it here, restoring it, and then believing that not only is God glorified, but that God will continue to match our fruitfulness and that He is never outdone when we respond in generosity.